Is the government putting unions before pensioners? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Pick up the phone and tell me what you think. Ministers, we know, have offered a 15% pay rise to train drivers, with reports other rail unions may now expect similar terms. Meanwhile, millions of pensioners face losing their winter fuel payments in England and Wales as the cash boost becomes means tested. Age UK says pensioners feel they're being treated as a lower priority. Do you agree? Mike, when we say unions, obviously we're not talking about unions. We're talking about the people that the unions represent. Those are the people getting the pay rise. And if anybody's being prioritised...
But the unions do the deal. They're represented, but ASLEF represent their members. Their members work on the trains and they get the pay rise, which has taken them up to 70k a year.
Yeah, we looked at this yesterday. Obviously, that is after a freeze since 2019, and this is staged over another 3 years.
Yeah, but we're talking about the present. And in the present, we're comparing this with taking away the £300 a year winter fuel allowance for pensioners. I think it's an absolute disgrace. A pensioner in this country gets between £12,000 and £13,000 a year. And I've seen old women in supermarkets examining the price of every single item before they put it in their basket, because that's how short of money they are. Some pensioners will not be able to afford to put their heating on this winter, whilst train drivers are getting 70k, and the other body, which the new government have given money to, are junior doctors, some of whom earn £50,000 or £60,000 a year. I think it's an absolute disgrace.
After 7 years of qualifying to get to that stage.
But we're talking about the present. We're talking about the vulnerable people in our society. Pensioners, we should be looking after. We're not. We're punishing them.
Well,
we're punishing them, and it's a disgrace.
Isn't the worrying thing, though, is that we're encouraged to see that one group has to lose out so that the other gains?
Yes, I totally agree.
It's the way a budget works. It's the way an economy works. I totally agree. But
do you think it's right in a civilised society to take money off pensioners so they can't look after themselves in the winter and give it to £70,000 a year train drivers?
Stop.
I think it's an utter disgrace.
Stop. You've just totally misrepresented what's going on.
No, I haven't. I've given you the facts.
You have. It is means tested, which means your dear old ladies, and I agree with you, there are many pensioners here who absolutely need and must get the winter fuel allowance. Those are not the people who are losing the money.
They are.
They're people like me. And I'm very happy that I'm losing. And my husband, and he's very happy because we don't need it. And we'd rather it went to those people. So don't misrepresent it that all pensioners, the poorest, are also losing it. That's not the fact.
10% of the current pensioners who get £300 a year, only 10% will get it if they fill in a load of paperwork and apply for it. It is an absolute scandal.
You're misrepresenting this.
No, will you tell me what it is? I've looked at it. It's 10%.
I think it's time that those pensioners who have assets, and in London and some cities we get free transport, which is worth such a lot of money, right? And many other advantages, are asked to sacrifice. And actually, you know what? One of the things is to stop doing what you just said, dividing people off one from the other. Because nurses say, if they're getting more money, they have pensioner parents too. People are not just one thing or the other. They are, and so when the shadow transport secretary says the government has chosen to prioritise the unions over passengers and taxpayers and pensioners too, workers are passengers and taxpayers and have pensioner parents too. So we're not one group against the other. That's such a fake and false and dangerous way of describing what's going on.
That's what's happening.
I want to make sure we take as many calls as we can. May's in Hampshire. Do you think that's what's happening here, May? Is the government favouring the unions over pensioners?
Most definitely. And there's another aspect of this which no one has even considered. With the latest pension increases, it puts a lot of pensioners into the income tax bracket.
Okay.
So not only are they losing their fuel allowance, they are losing money in income tax.
Okay.
That is not fair compared against what train drivers and other union people are getting.
And that's been happening over the previous administration as well, to get to that point.
I agree.
That threshold creep.
I agree.
That threshold but May, here's the question. Should we be giving benefits, which come out of all of our pockets, to pensioners that don't need them? if, like Yasmin says, there are people who can perfectly afford their fuel bills, they are receiving them as well. Those benefits, the winter fuel allowance, is just now being means tested.
Yes, but it's not really being means tested because there are people just over the limit to claim any benefits at all. And they are being deprived of what they need in the winter. Not only that, why are we giving the fuel allowance to people who live in places like Spain? Surely that could be addressed.
OK, I mean, that's
a good idea.
It seems to me that there's always an inaccuracy when you're giving out benefits or when you're taking them away. And what May's saying here is that bracket there, and to be honest, is it pension credit, I think, which is losing out? It will be means tested, but there are certainly people on the edge of the qualification criteria who are going to lose out. Yasmin, maybe you're way beyond that. OK, we can accept that. But there are going to be people who do need that.
Mick Jagger gets a winter fuel allowance.
So does Lord Sugar.
Yeah.
And tries to send it back. Send it back.
Do you think?
But what I'm saying is, Yasmin, how many pensioners do you think are in your bracket? You have admitted that you are a woman of means, that you are reasonably well off and all that.
I'm not rich.
But I would say...
But I can afford it. I can afford to pay
But only 10% of pensioners are in your bracket.
I'm just surprised.
The other 90%
That's not
can't.
true. If you take into account their wealth and their property and they're not paying rent, we have to get better facts on this.
I'm
I'm
surprised that you're happy with handing out benefits to people that clearly don't need them.
No, I'm not. I don't want a universal handout. I want them to be means tested. But they haven't been means tested for decades, and they won't be means tested now because there's too much paperwork. The people who lose out... Look, there could be a pensioner living in a £1 million house that pensioner bought for £25,000 40 years ago, but it's still got to pay bills to heat the house, and they still only get £12,000 or £13,000 a year against a train driver who's now getting 70 grand a year for a 4-day week and is not even asked to work on Sundays.
How many train drivers do we have?
Okay.
And how many pensioners do we have? Can we make a fair comparison? How many train drivers do we have and how many pensioners do we have? Even if we halved the amount we pay train drivers, can we afford the pension? No.
OK, let's hear from Keith. He's in Wolverhampton. Keith, is the government prioritising unions and train drivers over our pensioners?
Well, that appears to be the case, and I have to say I agree with everything Mike has said, and I disagree with most of what Yasmin has said. I'm actually caught in the middle here. I'm living below the poverty line. But because I get a small private pension, I'm just above the threshold that I won't receive pension credit, so I will be £300 worse off. And there are a lot of people like me. Yes, there's probably 10 to 15 pensioners who are really well off. I know a chap who gets 70,000, and his winter fuel allowance went on his air conditioning in the Philippines. But 40% of pensioners are really badly off. The really worst ones who are just getting the old age pension will receive the pension credit. And then I'm one of the people in the middle with a small private pension, so I'm below the poverty line, but I'm above the pension credit threshold, so I will be badly hit. Now, I come from a working class background. I was born in a coal mining village. We always voted Labour. Labour traditionally always looked after working class people and the poor. That doesn't appear to be the case anymore. They seem to see us as a target. Rachel Reeves challenged Jeremy Hunt in Parliament three months ago, saying, I hear you're going to be taking the winter fuel allowance off pensioners. Disgraceful. He denied it, and now look what's happened since. There's even a rumour on about taking the bus pass off us. I don't know why they see us as a target. I really don't. But Mike's correct. Everything Mike said is correct. Yasmin, you're out of touch, I'm afraid. There are lots of people like me. There are far more people like me than people like you, Yasmin. We're not all rich pensioners.
I'm not rich, but I can afford to pay my
Relative to me, you are, Yasmin. Relative to me.
Yeah, of course. And you've made your point very well.
Keith's point is that he is in that gap there, where he's just above the criteria that to get pension credit.
So maybe we need to sort that out.
Yeah.
You know, what the line is, where the line is, how you do a fair assessment. That seems to me quite important.
Isn't this also horrible, nasty, pernicious politicking? Because ASLEF, the union we're talking about here, have given 180,000 to Keir Starmer since he became leader of the Labour Party, including 100,000 for their election campaign. Now, that is almost bribery. If ASLEF are giving huge funds to Labour and Labour in return are giving them massive pay rises, then there's something terribly wrong with the political machine, isn't there? It shouldn't be allowed.
And millionaires have been funding the Tories. Millionaire bosses have given untold amount of money to the Tories so that the Tories shaped their policies. So that
private enterprise, because capitalism works.
So they shaped their policies to suit the capitalists.
Would you say that the train system is working at the moment?
No, I wouldn't. And £11 billion is given by the taxpayer to the train companies to run those trains, and now the passengers on those trains will either have to pay more for their tickets to fund this ridiculously high pay rise, or the government will have to give the train operators more subsidies. It's nonsense.
After the break, clearly, we've got a lot more left in this debate. We're going to be taking more of your calls. We're going to take as many calls as we can on whether the government is putting unions before pensioners. 0207 862 2222 is the number. Give us a ring. James is in Liverpool. James, do you think the government is prioritising those unions and train drivers ahead of our pensioners?
Hello, Matt.
Hey, James.
I just want to say Mike makes a lot of sense what he's been saying, and I do think that the pensioners should be looked after before train drivers. I used to work on the railway. I also, just a few quick points, if that's okay. I think they should have driverless trains. Somebody should be operating them. They should do it that way. I mean, as I say, I've worked on the railway. I've worked with drivers, and it's not nice seeing them brag about how much they earn. You don't get pensioners bragging about getting a £300 payment, which they're getting taken off them.
James,
but you get
how much of this is down to the fact that train drivers have a strong union, pensioners don't?
Well, the union. When I worked on the railway, I worked in maintenance, and train drivers, in a lot of people's eyes, other staff's eyes, train drivers were looked after, prioritised by the union, whereas any other sort of members of staff, a little bit lower down, you could say, were not sort of given the full attention of the union. So train drivers are prioritised by the unions, but again, they should not be prioritised over pensioners. As I say, train drivers used to brag about how much they earn, and it's not nice to see when you work harder than them. A lot of staff on the railway work harder than drivers. I left there to get out because it wasn't a nice place to work. It's a big clique.
James,
hold on. I just want to put this to Yasmin, because part of this deal that they're being talked about, it still hasn't been accepted yet. The 15% doesn't come with any strings attached, no conditions, which reform the way the railways work. You know, James talked about driverless trains there. The Tories had an 8% pay rise in place, which did require changes to the way that it was run.
Please don't tell me that anything the Tories did was a good thing, because they squandered 850 million resisting the demands of various unions. And let's not just pick on one union. I thought it was a very interesting observation from James, and he knows what he's talking about. What about nurses? Why aren't we talking about nurses' pay? They too, as a union, took action. Are we saying that nurses are less valuable than what all pensioners are? We have to expand the way we think about this. So it's not just the train drivers, is it, we're talking about? We're talking about junior doctors. Some of them were getting £12 an hour for working.
But we are talking about train
now,
drivers. Because
the deal's just been done.
The question was a much broader one about unions versus pensioners.
But it's because the train drivers deal has just been done. If James is still there, I don't know if he's still there, but he talked about the working practices of railwaymen. We probably won't need train drivers very much longer because robots, but what about the working conditions where Sunday is not even a working day?
OK.
You know,
I want to take another call if we can. Candy's in Kent. Candy, do you think the government is prioritising unions over pensioners?
No, I think it's divide and rule. I don't agree with Mike whatsoever. Just because pensioners are suffering, it doesn't mean that workers have to suffer. 15% pay over so many years isn't an awful lot. They just want their standard of living restored to previous levels after cuts. And the train companies are by and large privatised, aren't they? So if they were renationalised, you wouldn't be paying the bonuses and the dividends to the shareholders and the CEOs. So that would free up some money to pay the workers. And Yasmin, I must just say that I've just recently retired as a nurse. Nurses are balloting now for a decent pay rise.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, what Candy's describing here is a race to the bottom. That's the way it's described, isn't it? That actually, if you start using the winter fuel allowance as an argument for every single industrial action or negotiation, then nobody... We've seen massive inflation over the last couple of years. People's standard of living has to keep up with the cost of living.
Candy said, we've got to look after all workers, and compared them to pensioners. But workers getting £70,000 a year, sometimes only working a 4-day week, against pensioners.
Workers,
and
not
pensioners.
nurses.
And by the way, Candy, I think it's absolutely cowardly for the government to pick on pensioners, because pensioners can't hit back. Pensioners can't go on strike. They're usually too old to get out in the streets and protest with banners. So they are easily the most vulnerable people in our society. And the government have just decided to have a go at them. It's cowardly.
Mike, they still vote. Let's not forget that.
But they don't vote for Labour. That's half of the point.
Mick's in North Yorkshire. And Mick, you are a unionist. Does this make sense, this deal for you? Is this a success for the unions?
Absolutely is. It's also payback to the unions for getting a government out of power. 49 years I was a union man, Matt, and I was a proud union, and I've been out on strike for money. I live in a modest 2-bedroom bungalow. I worked hard for that. 25 years I had a mortgage on my neck, but these people, it's just beyond the pale. It's a good job you've got a people's champion like Mike Graham there, because Yasmin's talking claptrap. Pensioners, you've just said it. The train drivers have a good union. The pensioners don't. So we're an easy target.
OK.
Don't get me wrong, Matt.
Isn't the argument then, Mick...
I'm one of those that, I can manage without it. I'd rather have it because I am not well off. And for Yasmin to say, well, Mick Jagger gets it, Elton John, what a load of rubbish.
Listen, I wish I had time to come back to you, Yasmin, to be able to answer that, but we are running out of time.
But just don't use things like rubbish and claptrap. You can disagree with me. I don't talk like that.
OK. Yasmin, thank you. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Mick. Thanks for all of our calls.